Welcome to the Work Activities Information Session. Today we'll be providing you with information on work activities for program participants. This presentation will provide an overview of what a work activity is, when to create or start a work activity, and the importance of having individuals assigned. The program has gone through many changes, and here's a brief history. The Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act eliminated the aid to families with dependent children, also known as AFDC. Welfare was no longer open-ended. Recipients were no longer entitled. The Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, also known as TANF, established to replace AFDC. Here, the recipients were then required to perform work activities in exchange for cash benefits. Acceptable activities were listed, but they weren't well defined. Unequal state-to-state measurements of activities were noted. Some states had different interpretations of acceptable work activities. The work activities had to be defined by the Department of Health and Human Services, also known as HHS, so that the states could be equally measured. Currently, there are 12 work activity categories that have been established. Unsubsidized employment, subsidized private sector employment, subsidized public sector employment, work experience, providing child care, on-the-job training, community service programs, vocational educational programs, job search and job readiness assistance, education directly related to employment, satisfactory attendance in the secondary education, job skills training directly related to employment. The 12 categories were divided into two subcategories called Core and Core Plus. Core activities can stand alone and do not require another activity to count towards participation. Core Plus activities must be accompanied by a minimum number of hours of participation in a core activity to count towards participation. Core activities consisted of 9 activities as followed: unsubsidized employment, subsidized private sector employment, subsidized public sector employment, on-the-job training, work experience, community service programs, vocational education training, job search and job readiness assistance, and providing child care. Core Plus activities include job skills training, education directly related to employment, satisfactory attendance at a secondary school. The activities count as core activities for teens who do not have a high school diploma. Teens that do not have a high school diploma can be assigned to these categories and count as core assignments. Let's discuss work activity definitions. Unsubsidized employment is employment that is part-time or full-time which the employer does not receive a subsidy and can include self-employed and also in-kind work. Unsubsidized employment wages are paid by the employer and are not subsidized by any public program, and the hours worked are assumed to be supervised since the individual receives a wage for working. Must have employment verification and documentation showing start date, employer information, wage, and hours at hire. Self-employment is where the customer is both the employer and the employee. Countable hours are determined by dividing the individual's documented income less business expenses by minimum wage. Staff cannot take the participant's statement for self-employment. Subsidized employment is when an employer receives a subsidy to offset wages and/or the cost of employment of an individual. Private subsidized employment means the subsidy comes from a private entity or program. For example, Day Law Firm and M&T Bank. Public subsidized employment means the subsidy comes from a public entity or program. For example, the city of Newport Richey or the state of Florida. Supervision is required for subsidized employment and based on documentation. Acceptable forms of documentation may include pay stubs, timesheets, the work number, copies of checks, and copies of money orders. On-the-job training is when an employer receives a subsidy while the employee is working full-time. The customer is paid for training hours and also work hours. On-the-job training opportunities require contracts to be developed between the employer and the institution and workforce. The contract must contain goals, job titles, supervisor, training dates, required skills, and termination causes. Let's look at work experience. Work experience is structured work in exchange for public benefits, helps gain work experience and added skills, and helps the individual engage with employers. Work experience must provide customers an opportunity to gain work skills, training, and job knowledge. Prior to placement in a work site, the providers must be evaluated to match the participant and their goals. The employer cannot terminate a paid employee to fill the vacancy with the work experience participant. Work experience may be performed in a public entity or a not-for-profit entity. Work experience must be supervised and have a designated contract in place for each work site. All contracts prepared for work experience must include the following: goals, outcomes, job title, time limits, clear job descriptions, and performance benchmarks. Work experience and performance benchmarks help the participant achieve goals and skills that will also assist in gaining work experience to become gainfully employed. From basic skills like arriving to the work site on time or learning how to work office equipment to enhancing computer skills, these basic benchmarks are important when seeking employment. When looking at community service, it is very similar to work experience. One main difference is that the organizations are not-for-profit and must serve as useful community purposes. Some examples of community service might include urban and rural redevelopment, environmental protection, social services, public facilities, public safety recreation, education, child care, and welfare. Community service must provide the customer with an opportunity to improve work skills and reach employment goals. An employer cannot displace or terminate a paid employee to fill a position with a community service customer. Community service contracts must include goals, outcomes, job title, time limits, clear job descriptions, and performance benchmarks in order to be valid. Community service and performance benchmarks help the participant achieve goals and skills that will also assist with gaining work experience to become gainfully employed. From basic skills like arriving to the work site on time or learning how to work office equipment to enhancing computer skills, These basic benchmarks are important when seeking employment. Job Search Job Readiness provides activities that assist customers in acquiring skills needed to seek employment, obtain employment, and remain employed. Some activities include dressing for success, workshops, resume development, job preparation, and interviewing skills. Job search and job readiness includes classroom activities such as orientation, job matching, time management, building skills, and life skills. Also, SAMH, which consists of treatment and counseling by state-approved providers. The need for treatment must be provided by a licensed physician, a licensed therapist, a licensed psychologist, a treatment professional, substance abuse professional, and mental health professional. Job Search Job Readiness is a time-limited activity that allows only 4 consecutive weeks in a rolling 12 months and no more than 6 weeks total. The weeks can also be converted into hours. Rolling months will be counted from the first full month of benefits received and may be broken down over a period of time. Job Search Job Readiness must also be supervised and documented on a daily basis. These hours can be supervised by a workforce professional, instructor, or service provider. No hours by proxy. Travel time to and from interviews does not count within the exception of traveling from home to the first interview and the last interview to home, but it would count if the customer travels from or back to the career center. Vocational training is a training that prepares a customer for employment in an emerging occupation. The training must be state approved and the participant may not count more than 12 months in a lifetime limit of cash assistance. Vocational training does not allow standalone basic skills classes, English proficiency classes, or college prep classes. These classes may be embedded within a program if they are required for the success of the student. Study time may be granted for up to 1 hour for every hour of class time. The customer is allowed credit for supervised and unsupervised study time as long as the study hours do not exceed the number of class hours and is approved by the instructor or staff member. Distance learning classes can also be used as long as they are verifiable. Job skills training is training through which a customer can obtain the skills required by an employer. Job skills training must meet specific needs of an employer and or prepare the customer for employment. Education and training may include post-secondary education, literacy, or language instruction. Educational activity are for those customers who do not have a high school diploma or GED, need further education related to their occupation, or customers with high school diploma from another country. The educational activity may include literacy skills, adult basic education, GED, and also ESOL. Satisfactory attendance at a secondary school are for those that have not completed secondary schooling and who have not completed the GED. This activity may include literacy education if required for high school or GED, adult basic education related to high school diploma or GED, and this activity may include study time for 1 hour of class time, but should not exceed the number of hours recommended by the instructor. Providing child care services is providing child care to enable another TANF recipient to participate in a community service program. Supervision will be required and must be maintained by staff and documents maintained in the case file. Providing child care services can be counted as activity hours as long as the activity of providing child care is not more credit hours than the number of completed hours by the assigned participant. Please note, two-parent families cannot watch their own children. While providing child care services, the customer is responsible for maintaining timesheets to document the number of hours for the needed child care, and also the worksite timesheet documenting the number of hours conducted. This concludes today's session on countable activities. Thank you and have a great day.